Hello, everyone. This is the Faithful Life Podcast. I'm Matt Jacobson of FaithfulMan.com.
And I'm Lisa Jacobson of Club31Women.com. We're so glad you're here with us.
At Faithful Life, we explore what it means to be a biblical Christian in today's world, in our marriage, parenting, church, and culture.
It's real, raw, and relevant.
So let's get started. Hey, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Awesome to be with you today. Got a little bit of a cold, so hopefully I'll choke my way through what we're doing here.
Yes, it's so good to be with you. Thank you so much for the reviews that you've left on iTunes. We appreciate that. So kind and encouraging. And if you're so inclined, we would love it if you just shared it with your family and friends and give us a shout out on your social media. Those are all great ways for us to get the word out about the podcast.
All right. So listen, what we're talking about today is giving your son a vision for the man he is becoming. All right. The culture is headed exactly where the children have been led. Have you ever stopped to think about that? I mean, I think that we often look at the culture and go, wow, disaster in the making. But the fact of the matter is the culture is headed where the children have been led. Parents have an amazingly important role in the direction of the culture. Today, we're talking about sons, and we are talking about instilling that vision in them. Parents of sons need to keep this thing in mind right here. You are raising someone's husband, and you are raising someone's father.
And just so for those of you who don't know, we actually have 4 sons ourselves. We have an older son who is 25, lives back in D.C., and has been on his own for a long time, actually. And then we have 3 teenage boys at home. So what we're talking about today is very real, very current in our own lives, as well as what we're sharing about for yours.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things we wanted to impress upon you is that just our boys, if they're left to themselves, it's not a good thing. The current culture and then his own fleshly impulses, those things are going to inform his life if you, the parents, don't provide vision and direction. So lately in our home, we've been talking about Lord of the Flies because our boys have had to read it for school, and it's been a long time since I'd actually read it. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, it's about a bunch of boys who are marooned on an island, and there's no direction, no vision, no authority. And basically, it's every man for himself, and it's a total disaster. And it's just a story, but there's a lot of real truths to that story.
And that story reinforces the old saying, idle mind is the devil's playground, and the idle hands are the devil's workshop. So those two things, right? Thinking and doing what's in your son's mind, and then that manifesting in what he does with his hands. And so it's super important to reinforce to your son from a very early age, you are becoming a man. This is the journey that you're on. And of course our culture says, hey, boys will be boys, you know. And that statement is true as far as it goes, but it doesn't really go far enough, because the fact of the matter is men will be boys too, if they're not trained to put away childish things, if they haven't been given a vision of manhood, and if they're not invited into the company of men to take their place in the society and culture. So we want to start from a very early age to instill in our sons that vision of what they're becoming. And you can start from a very, very young age.
Yeah, in fact, we have our good friends at Christian Sins, and they have this little guy, Luke, and he's not quite 3, I think, yet. And we have these huge rocks on our property, and so he was climbing up on these rocks. And when he got to the top, right in front of me, I saw him fall off.
Oh, he didn't fall; he jumped.
Oh, he jumped. That's right. He jumped, but fell flat on his face. Didn't quite catch it.
Just a major face plant.
And I thought, oh no, I just waiting for the screams because it was a pretty hard fall. But he got up, brushed himself off, and he said, hey, look, I'm a man. And then climbed right up back on the top of that same rock. I couldn't believe it. It was really cool.
So where did he get that message? I'm a man. Where did he get that vision for who he is, right? That comes from dad and mom, Kyler and Kayla. And they've been instilling this into him from a young age. Brush it off, go forward, don't let a little setback put you down. And so that's just awesome messaging for a little guy.
I had another friend who had a little guy who was about the same age, about this 3-year-old age, and she and I were deep in this conversation, and he obviously had something he wanted to say to his mom, and she kept having him wait until we were done, having him wait. I almost felt badly for him because the little guy seemed like he waited for a really long time for us to finish.
Sometimes parents take that to an extreme, right?
And but finally when we were done, she turned to him and she said, looked right in his little eyes, and she said, "You are patient, and I like that in a man." I tell you, I never forgot that That's that powerful word in that little man's life, and how it would inform him in who he was going to become.
So remind your son of the man that he is becoming. And the fact of the matter is, I think Coke and Pepsi can help us out a lot here.
Okay, help me with it. Help me with this one. Okay.
Well, listen, advertising works, right?
Okay.
There is a reason that Coke and Pepsi spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year advertising their product worldwide. They are in competition with each other, and they don't want the other company to define them. They want to define themselves in the market.
Okay.
And they don't just enjoy spending money. They don't just say, hey, you know what? We got a like 100 million lying around. Let's find a way to waste it. Advertising works. They have a message and they're reinforcing it. Well, it's the exact same thing with our children. And so a question that we would have for you is, who is informing your son of the context that he's being raised in, of who he is, and the truth that he aspires to walk in? Who's doing that? Because if it's not you, rest assured, it's getting done. It's getting done by the society and the culture and, frankly, his flesh. So who is messaging, who is giving this messaging to your son for him to walk in? Advertising works. We want to reinforce with our kids from a very young age, our sons, the man they are becoming.
And sometimes as parents, we can feel helpless almost in terms of his school, his friends, the world, himself. And they all are so noisy in his life. But we actually need to remember that God has put us in their lives for a purpose. And it's part of our responsibility is to help him become the man that God has called him to be. And part of that is just reinforcing the natural giftings that God's given him. As a parent, stopping and really taking the time to study and look at your son and see what is it he's good at, what are his passions, and identify those things and encourage them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we have a kind of a funny story from our past. Is there was this guy running around and he was saying to his little kid, "Be a leader, be a leader." And he was a very A-type, aggressive type personality. Be a leader. He wanted his son to be a leader. And we looked at that little guy, and he actually had a soft spirit, more of a quiet and reflective kind of personality. Mm-hmm. But he wanted that kid to be what he thought would be great. Mm-hmm. Probably one of the biggest mistakes parents make. They want their sons to fulfill their own dreams.
Yeah, we have to be really careful that we're not, it's not our vision, that we're really seeking God's vision for that young man, no matter what his age is, and encourage him in those goals, those God-given desires. And just ask yourself, like, what is my son's personality and what is he good at? And spend time as parents really evaluating that and thinking of ways that you can encourage those things and encourage him in his gifting.
And these inclinations often manifest at a very early age in life, don't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Even from like these little 3-year-olds we've been talking about, you can see that those budding personalities, those budding giftings.
So when you see that parent who's pushing their kid in a direction that is really more about them than about who the kid is, what do you like to say to them?
Yeah, I would just say to let him live out the life that God has given him, not the life you want him to have.
Mm-hmm. You know, and this is really about caring about who your son is as a separate, unique creation of God, separate from you, different from you, absolutely unique creation of God. It's this parenting mistake is I want him to be something that I think is awesome. But what's the message in that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about me instead of about what God's doing.
And the message that is reinforced in the mind of that kid when we're constantly pushing in a direction that we think is wonderful, but maybe not be what God has planned for him. The message is, you don't measure up. You're not okay. There's something wrong with you that needs fixing. And it's such a negative message where we want to actually instill vision and a positive message into the life and heart of our kids.
You know, one of the things that you say often to all of our kids is I love the way God made you. Like even older in their teenage years, I still hear you saying that to each one at various times.
Absolutely. I learned from Coke and Pepsi. Reinforce the message. So, you know what? There's a great movie out there. Comes with a bit of a caveat. There's some stuff in the movie that probably isn't great.
PG-13.
But it's really great on this message, however, of a parent wanting his son to be something other than what his son was made to be. The movie is called October Sky. It's actually a true story about somebody who wound up working at NASA. And it's just really great, really moving, wonderful story. But it kind of encapsulates this message of, now you need to embrace who your son is, his unique giftings, his differences from you, and support that. And so anyway, we would encourage you to watch it with the caveat that you might have to fast forward.
It might be on VidAngel, I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe. But give your son a vision of the excellence of his giftings, right? That's what you want to do. You want to give him a vision of the excellence of the giftings that God has given him.
Oftentimes parents have not grown up in this way of communicating, this bold, this is what God has for you. I know that I didn't feel like I did. So when I first started instilling vision, doing my part as a mom, it felt awkward to me. It felt almost embarrassing. And I had to actually practice speaking those truth into our kids' lives. But it's worth it. It's worth it to see them stand up a little taller and to reach a little higher, to go ahead and be bold.
Well, in a very real way, your kids are taking their identity of who they are from your confidence in them, in their giftings, and in their future. It's a powerful thing. And I think it's frankly something that's ubiquitous in the millennial generation is among the men. They don't feel like men. They feel illegitimate in the company of men. And the former generation has done such a bad job across the board, frankly, of raising them up to be men in their own right, to feel secure in the company of men, secure in their own giftings and their own sense of self and understanding of who they are. So that is something that's very common among parents these days, is they feel a little sensitive about boldly speaking this vision into life. They don't even feel it, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. No.
I just want to encourage the men out there, say what little Lukey said.
That's good.
I am a man. All right? You are a man, and you don't need to apologize for it. You are the man that God made. You are the man that God chose to be the dad of this son. You are the mom that God chose to be the mom of this son. So say just what little Lukey says all the time. I'm a man. Okay? Because you are a man, and God has uniquely gifted you and uniquely blessed your children for you to be their parent. So boldly step into this role. Just embrace it. Stop apologizing when you walk in the room, at least in your own heart, right?
Yep.
You are legitimate because God declares you so. You are a child of His. You are a son, a daughter of the Most High God, and you are an overcomer. This is your identity in Christ. So just embrace that and say no to those voices that essentially are there to tear you down and to remove your effectiveness as the parent that God gave this son.
And if you're wondering, okay, now how do I do that? How do I instill a vision? It can be as simple as telling your son, you're going to be a great husband someday. Just say it, speak into his life.
I think there are many times when our sons do something, and that is your opportunity right there.
They'll do, several of our sons will make coffee for me in the morning, for instance. I'm a very spoiled mom. And they'll bring in a coffee tray and just say, here, Mom, here's your coffee. And I'm only half kidding. In fact, I'm hardly kidding at all. But I'm teasing them. I said, you're going to be a great husband someday.
So what you're really doing in speaking that message into your sons, you're orienting their perspective toward marriage, right? Mm-hmm. This is important. Orient your son's perspective toward marriage. He is literally in training as someone else's husband. And so it's your job at an early age to orient his thinking that way. It will inform decisions that he makes as he gets older and as he starts considering that place that he's going to take in the life of a family someday. And that orientation starts very, very young.
And we see increasingly in this generation that, at least I hear a lot of single women saying, where are the men? They're not seeking marriage. They're not seeking to build something. And you can start just at this young age, helping them to have that vision for what God has for them as a husband.
Your children, by and large, are going to have thoughts that had as their impetus from what you put into them, what you spoke into them. And so that's why we're just really strongly encouraging, be regular with this messaging into the heart and life of your son.
Yeah, another simple thing to say along the same lines is you're going to be a great daddy, and just giving him that vision for fatherhood. And again, just a few weeks ago, I was talking to a beautiful young single woman, and I was almost surprised that she was still single. She was such a lovely person, loved the Lord, and she said, there have been a few guys that were potentially interested in her, but they were not interested in having a family. They didn't want children.
Yeah, she said it was actually really difficult to find
a
Christian man who wants to have a family. That's frankly sick. If we have, were you
no,
going to say
I was going to
something?
say it was really sad. Yeah.
It is sad, but it's also sick. If we have a generation of young men, eligible men of marriageable age in the church, and their perspective is, yeah, I don't really want a family, or yeah, maybe someday, and it's not really a priority. We've raised young men who do not have God's perspective and priority on the subject of children. All right? We simply don't. We look at children as something, we can look at children as something to accessorize our lives if we feel like it. This is not a biblical perspective. And here this young woman looking for a man who wanted to have children. That's really sad when you think about building the culture, building the church, and growing in the way that God intended us to grow. And so, by all means, be specific and be regular with that messaging. You're going to be a great dad someday.
And we certainly can't rely on today's world or friends or school or culture to instill that vision. That's going to be on us and the Word of God.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and John Wayne. I mean,
Okay,
so.
Does he drink Coke too?
Well, you're right. The instilling of the vision for these life paths that almost all of our children are going to walk is our responsibility. And we need wisdom along the way. And that's why I brought up John Wayne.
Okay, I knew we were going to tie it back somehow.
John Wayne said, life's tough, but it's tougher if you're stupid. So here's a way for a young man not to be stupid. Okay? There's a book of wisdom in the Bible, and it's the book of Proverbs. And a lot of people are familiar with the book of Proverbs. But the fact of the matter is the book of Proverbs is this incredible collection of sayings that are these little golden nuggets of truth that you can live by, that you can orient your thinking with, and will inform how you make decisions and how you think of things, and how you avoid the pitfalls that are natural to the life of a young man and a young woman too. Just we happen to be talking about young men today. Right. But the fact of the matter is this is a great book. You don't want to give your 10-year-old the Bible and say, here, honey, read. Well, some kids, okay. I know the homeschool parents out there whose children know Swahili in sign language. That's great. But I'm just saying the average kid out there is, you're not going to have him reading some Levitical passage, right? But there are places in the Bible that are really good, really apropos for young people to dig into. And the book of Proverbs is one of those, and it's filled with wisdom. And so we want to take that opportunity and instill that wisdom. And God has this book for young men to learn and to grow in wisdom. A couple of examples, I just randomly opened up the book of Proverbs to, chapters 18 and 19. So here's verse 9 from 18. He also that is slothful in his work is brother to him that is a waster. Okay? So there's a message from God about, are you a waster? Are you slothful? This is not good. Be diligent in your work. That's the message of that verse. Here's another one from 19, verse 5. A false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaks lies shall not escape. Right? Your sins will find you out. Be truthful. Walk in the truth. Be a person who tells the truth.
One of the things we did is actually started off with, we were homeschooling, and our kids were having troubles with their spelling and handwriting. And Matt said, okay, let's try this, because I had tried a bunch of different curriculums. And he said, let's just have him write out the book of Proverbs. And it started off with just a verse a day, and then we increased it over time. But our oldest son, Britton, who, like I said, is 25, he ended up writing through the entire book of Proverbs maybe 4 or 5 times, and he still has those journals of his handwriting. And not too long ago, I was talking to him about this, and he said, I have so many of those Proverbs memorized. Like they're in my head. Even if I don't know them exactly, I remember the gist of them, and how big of influence it was as he went through college, as he went through his work. And so it's long lasting, that impact of the Word of God.
And actually, our girls wrote those out too.
Yes.
And it's just super impactful. So yeah, use the book of Proverbs, and don't be stupid, like John Wayne said.
I hear I do hear a lot from moms who are struggling with their sons, either young or into their teen years, and they just want them to get the message. They want them to listen to them. And the thing I would encourage you, and I'm speaking to parents, but especially to all you wonderful, devoted, well-meaning moms, is be mindful that you are talking less and listening more. And don't base your parenting just on lecturing. And I say that from my heart and from personal experience. And I asked Britton right before he went off to college at 18, and just asked him what was the best thing that as a mom that I did for you or could do for you. And he just stopped for a minute, and I just kind of held my breath to see what he would say. And he said, listening, just listening to me. And so I just want you to remember that there's a huge power in listening, not just talking, and that it's okay just to pray for your son and not always have to have the wise word or the right things, but just quietly praying.
And I would also say there's probably people out there going, yeah, well, my teenager doesn't even want to talk. All right. And that's not that uncommon, frankly. Teenage boys can often kind of pull in a little bit. So first of all, you're not walking some strange, uninhabited land. This is kind of a common thing. But what you can do instead of the lectures, and as parents, we just love our lectures, don't we? I mean, we just love those lectures. But what you can do, and if he's not going to give you that opportunity to listen, he's not going to be talking, he's not going to be open up. What you can do is you can speak words of truth and words of affirmation. You can speak to him the things that you love about him, the things that you think are great, his triumphs. You can just mention those, and you don't have to mention anything else. And when you're refraining from the lecture, but you're focusing on those things that you like about your son, that you're excited about in terms of his accomplishments, things that he's done, things that you can look at and just say something positive about, what you enjoy about him, you're building up your relationship with him, even though he isn't that forthcoming to you. And so it's a very positive thing you can do if you've got one of those teenage sons that aren't very forthcoming.
Yeah, and you might be surprised that just when you least expect it, they sit down at the edge of your bed or by you on the couch and start talking after you have built up your relationship in that way.
So
and that's happened to us many times where we think, oh, he's not really opening up, he's not talking, and we try to just be there for them, be there with them, and then speak those positive words when we're able to. And then just when you think everything is normal, they come up to you and start pouring out their heart or just sharing something that's important to them and exciting. So don't take today as definition of what's going to be tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the nice thing is if you do all this right, then they'll never make a mistake and they'll never suffer. Right?
Oh, I used to think so.
Okay. Yeah, so our kids are kind of like us, right?
People?
You ever stumble? Yeah, people, imagine that. You ever stumble? You ever make a mistake? You ever go, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. What a mistake, right? Well, your son is going to stumble. And it's very important that you don't overreact, right? He is walking out this journey and he's going to have some triumphs. He's going to have some failures. Don't overreact. Just be there with him, walk through it with him, point him to the truth, but don't overreact. All right. So great discussion. We're kind of closing in on the end here. And so what are some of today's takeaways?
Well, first of all, give your son a vision of the man he is becoming.
Number 2, the culture is waiting to fill the void that you leave. So don't leave one.
3, remind your son he's becoming a man.
4, reinforce the idea of becoming an excellent husband.
And along the same lines, number 5, reinforce the idea of he's becoming a good dad.
And remember John Wayne, life's tough, but it's tougher if you're stupid. So
I don't think that was on our list.
So point him to the book of wisdom, point him to the book of Proverbs.
And lastly, number 7, listen more, talk less, pray most.
Absolutely. And just one final word, just remember that it's not a one-time thing. This is just what you get to walk in
a journey.
as that parent, this journey, and you're just reinforcing this messaging along the way from a very early age. Just remember Lukey.
That's right. I'm a man.
All right.
So if you've enjoyed this podcast, we just would like to ask you that you be willing to share it on your social media, Facebook, Instagram, Insta Story. And if you tag us, we'll probably get a chance. If we see it, we'll share it again too. So thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. Well, listen, goodbye. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for being part of this discussion. We hope that God's blessing is on you as you speak the vision of your son's future into his heart, as you speak the vision of manhood into his heart. Thanks so much for being here today.
Remember, our God is our rock and our Redeemer.
He already knows what your week holds. He already knows what you're facing.
He loves you and is for you.
So draw near to God this week, and He will draw near to you.